Hello everyone, this is Laura from Grain & Company, and today we're going to go through the Hello Spring sign for your April Creative Maker subscription box. So let's get started. So in your box you will have a shiplap sign base, and then you will have your easels. You will have one set of pieces there, and then you'll have another set on the round. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint the back first, and then we're going to go into breaking this apart so it's easier to paint. And yeah, so let's get started there. As you can see, my easel stand is already stained, but I will try and go over that technique for you guys, for those who have not done any of our boxes before. But anyway, so you're going to need your base, and you're also going to need your white paint, and you are going to need your 2-inch brush for this one. Oops, let's get this out of here. All right, so we're not going to paint the back side, but we are going to do the sides and the front. So for me, I like to do the sides first because it's easier to hold the board as I go around, and then I can place this down here after and just paint the front. Okay, so when doing the sides, just use a little bit of paint. You'll most likely get some paint on the back, but you can easily go in after and sand it off. So just do a little bit. I didn't put a whole lot on my brush, and just go around and kind of get that in there. See, that's just all I have on my brush. We're going to be doing 2 coats anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect on the first one. And just keep rolling it around. I'm on parchment paper, so if any of the paint drips and my board sits on there, it's not going to stick in place. So that's what I like about it. And I'm kind of just leaning my board as I go around. It's not actually standing on the part that I just painted, so that way I don't ruin that. Okay, and when I'm done, I'm usually going to go, I usually like to go to the back and just make sure that nothing is too bad. If the drops are too big in the back, sometimes it's a little harder to sand off. If you have an electric sander, that definitely is easier. And then right now, I'm just going to feather out anything that is on the edge. If you leave it to dry as you're doing this, sometimes you can see that ridge underneath the paint. So I just want to make sure that that's all feathered out and it's easier to blend. Okay, so I'm going to start with a bit more paint on my brush, and I'm going to kind of start into the middle and then blend to the outside. That way I don't have so much going over the edge. So I'm just getting it on, working it into the wood, and then I'm gently going to take my brush and smooth it out so my stroke goes all the way across, and then I just want to go around the edge and make sure there's no drips going on the side. So a bit more paint, start in the middle, push it to the edge. At this point, you don't have to worry about which way are those strokes going back and forth, but your final ones, you just want to take it and completely go to one side, and then don't keep playing with it anymore. So that way you don't see any brush strokes and any drag marks in your paint. If something isn't perfect, remember you're doing a second coat, and you can always catch it then. You don't have to push too hard, just a nice gentle hand. Putting too much pressure too can create ridge marks, and you don't want to overdo it on the paint because you don't want to be trying to move around a ton of paint because then it's going to dry before you have a chance to do that, and sometimes too much paint will leave you ridge marks as well. Okay, so that is done, and I'm going to move this so that I can continue on with the rest. So I'm just gonna, with my parchment paper, I can just take it and I can move it, and then I know it's not going to get my surface dirty. It's not going to stick to, you know, a paper surface that I'm going to put it on. So that I'm just going to move, and then we'll come back and do the second coat here in a little bit. Okay, and then with your brush, you don't have to wash it right away, so you can put it in a little bag, which I forgot, so I will be right back. Okay, so next I will talk about your easel stand. So mine should be unfinished. I didn't bring one home, and I forgot to bring my stain. So what you'll use is your foam brush. You'll have your whole wheat stain in your box. You'll need something like a lint-free cloth. We usually use blue shop towels, and you'll just dip it in the stain. You'll want to have some gloves on your hands, but this is a water-based stain. So you would dip it in the stain, and then you'll wipe it all on both sides, and then you will take your paper towel and you will wipe it to blend. Okay, and you'll do both of them, and then you'll just set them off to the side, and those would be done. Okay. All right, so next we're going to bring in these. Now there is a lot of pieces, and but process will be the same for all of them. So we've taped the front so your pieces don't, we can take it out of the machine, but we need to put some, take that tape off, and we need to start splitting up where, which colors are which. Now, once we've done that, we can always tape them back in, because you'll find that it's a little easier to paint them in the template for some of them than it is to just put them on some tape. So I'm just going to pull all these out. And just watch that little dot on the eye. Now, yes, I could try and reuse the tape, but as it peels off, it tends to lose its stickiness, especially when it wants to stick. We want it to stick to the shiny back of the adhesive, and it doesn't stick very well, so I usually have to use new tape. Okay, so the heart is gone. It's no longer needed unless you want to paint it and stick it in there, but that's like the opening of the birdhouse. So you can always use that heart for something else. All right, so I'm going to gently lift this up. If for some reason when you go to lift it up and something is not wanting to come out, just flip it over and make sure that the cut has completely gone through. Now, I do my best to check when they come out of the machine that it cuts all the way through, and there's sometimes I will miss just, you know, the tiniest little bit. So just lay it flat on the surface if you can get yourself an X-Acto knife, and just gently try and complete that line, and you'll be able to get it out. If you try and push it out, without doing that, you could definitely break it. Okay, so on these ones, so for these ones, you have the top of the birdhouse, you have the front of the planter, you have your kind of like string that sits on the planter, and then the little tiny pieces. And I don't want to lose these little tiny pieces, so I'm actually not going to take them out of here until I am ready to paint them. Now, they're also lined up in terms of where your flower pieces go. So we have scored these, so it's easy to line up these pieces. Now, as they are laid out on here is kind of where they're positioned here. This is the one on the right is for this one, and then it goes around. So when you're taking them out later, just kind of gently remember and maybe just lay them out from right to left or left to right or whatever, in the order they are on the planter, because it'll definitely make it easier. The leaves are not quite as difficult because all of the shapes are a little bit different, but the flower ones could prove to be a little bit of a challenge if you mix those up. Okay, so I'm going to turn around and tape the flowers into place, and then I will most likely remove everything else. Okay, so just be careful when you're pulling off the tape. Sometimes it can splinter the wood, just depending on that piece of wood, but so just gently pull it. Okay, so this should pop out that piece, and that piece. Okay, and it's kept these in here for me. So once I get to do these ones, I may pop the green leaves out, and then I don't have to worry about taping those off. And then that way, the purple is just being done on here, and the green can be done somewhere else. Okay, so to break these into their colors, we've got, these are gray. These are your greens. This one will have the cider color on the bottom. We'll have to do a little taping so we can do the stems and the purple separately. This is your spun cotton, or the light cream color. So that is the same as that one. So we're going to put that there. These are for that. And we'll just remember to pop, I'll just do it now. These are green, so we're going to put these here. So I'm just pushing on the tape in the back, and it pops them up a little bit. There we go. Okay, and then that's your purple. So let's get started on, we're going to get started on here. So I don't lose these. I'm going to put them back in here. Now, in the beginning, you don't necessarily have to take, you could tape the back first so they don't fall out. But I just wanted to show you all that before. So I'm just going to put them back in and run some tape, and then I know I won't lose that little dot as well for the eye. Now I don't necessarily have to put these back in, but I like them if they're there, because when I'm painting and if any paint gets down the sides, this way it'll just prevent it from going down the sides. Okay. When you put your dot back in, just watch, because there is the backing, and they kind of can be looking like the same color. So you want the shinier piece to be in the back. Otherwise the paint won't stick to that. Okay, so those are all in there, and we won't lose them. So we'll paint in there after. So we're going to start with this and this, because this is the piece that goes over top like that. So I'm going to do that, so then I can move on to doing the green and that as we go along. So you will grab your cider color, which is the orange terracotta type color. Now in your box, you will have some makeup sponges. So they look like this. I like to cut them in half, and I work my way down. When I'm done a little bit, I'll chop it off, and I could be left with some little pieces, but that's how you can use and not waste those sponges. So you'll need your sponge, a pair of scissors if you need to do some cutting, and you will also need some paper towel because you'll need to blot off. Now you can do some taping here. You don't need to necessarily take this right up to the top, but if you feel like you might not be that careful, you can just go in there and tape off where those stems begin. just like that. Close enough. That way you can be less careful. And then you also will need your baby wipes. Okay, so we're gonna get started here. So take your makeup sponge into your paint and you're going to dip it. Now, if you take all of that, it could be too much. Now, this particular area can afford to take more paint like this because we're not worrying about going over the edge right away. So for this area and this area, I will use that extra little paint, but I'll start in the middle first and work my way out. So that way, most of the paint is staying in the inside and not on the outside. So I'm just doing that, and I'm just doing dabs and filling this in. We're gonna do at least 2 coats. You're wanting to watch your edges, so that's why if you have the more paint when you get started, do it in the middle, so once you get to the edge, your piece does not have a whole lot, and it shouldn't get any on the edge or just a little bit. So when you're done, you can check. So my edges are clean, but that's what the baby wipes are for. You can take them and you can gently wipe that edge and remove any of that extra paint. So that first coat's gonna kind of look a little yucky because it's gonna raise the grain and be a little rough, but we'll get into some sanding after and make that look better. Okay, so this one, I've got a little bit of paint on there as well, but this isn't as big as an area, so I want to just be careful with this one. Don't want quite as much. Okay, and once again, just come in and check to see if you've got any paint on the side. Now I have just the tiniest bits right here on the side, just a little bit. So you just go in there and wipe it. Now it'll turn a little brown, that's just from the charring, but it just helps wipe away any of that extra paint. So we're just gonna let that sit there for a moment because that doesn't take very long to dry. And I'm gonna do one more color while we're waiting. So this piece on top is the darker taupey color. It's Cathedral Taupe, and we're just going to do the top of that. Now I could technically get all colors going here at once, but sometimes I just like to do a couple at a time, get them pieces done and out of the way. That way I don't have a ton of makeup sponges out here and they're drying. So I'm taking my scissors and cutting that one in half, and then I'm just going to use a little bit. Now for this particular one, because it's not very big, if I was to take that, I would be having paint all over the edges and I would have a lot of cleanup. So take your paint and then blot it off on the paper towel so it's almost looking dry, and then just come in here and do your dabbing. Now, even with just a little bit of paint, just because it's so small, it will get a light dusting of paint on the side. So if I take my baby wipe, I can go around and wipe that. See how clean that is? And then just come inside here and wipe that. So that one's done at the moment. Okay, so if I come back, that's already dry. And that's what's nice about the thin coats of paint, because it does dry fairly quickly. So take your 400 grit, that's the fine one. I think that's the only one in your kit. And you're just gonna sand. You're gonna wanna sand with the grain, just because it looks the most natural when you're done. If you start going against, you could see a whole bunch of scratch marks, and then it kind of just makes it look off. And then take some paper towel and give that a wipe. So you can see there's the sanded and there's the unsanded. So a lot of difference. Why sanding is great, because it makes everything look a lot better. So I'm going to do this one. So don't worry if it wears away some of that paint on the first coat. You're really just wanting to get that wood prep so that the next coat will go on a lot nicer. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to repeat and do this again. I'll just speed it up since you know what I'm doing. I'll be right back. Okay, that's done. And we're just going to let those dry. Oops, let me grab this again. Okay, so we're going to set those off to dry. Once again, we will do this one. Okay, and same thing. Okay, so that one should be good. We won't need to deal with that till later, and we'll just go back and sand it. Okay, so this one I'm going to look at. I think I'm going to do one more coat on that. The reason I'm doing 3 is because I can still see some spots that are light, and an orange tone can have a clear base, so sometimes it takes, you know, multiple coats to get a nice solid color, just like red. So that's why we're just going to probably do one more on there. Okay, so I'm going to leave the green and purple till last because that's going to be the ones with the most work. And so I'm going to do gray next, and I'm also going to do the cream one next. So this one's very flimsy, and I could just do it on its own, but I want that extra support just so I don't break it. So I'm just going to plop it back in here, and I'm just going to go on the other side and put a piece of tape, just enough to cover so I don't paint on the purple parts. That way I can keep it in there when I'm painting. Okay, so we'll just leave this one out and we'll come back to that in a second. So now we need for gray. So we need a sponge. So since I am done with this color, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to snip it off. And now I have a new clean spot and we can continue on there. So I'll grab my gray. Okay, and make sure I don't paint the wrong color. So when you're doing it in a template, you want to watch that you don't put too much paint on your sponge because you're trying to avoid getting it on the sides. If you get it on the sides, once it starts to dry, it can stick these in here and not come out. So even though I'm doing a little bit, just like before, dip it in there, blot it all off. I'm going to dab it on here. And we're going to build up those layers. So when you're pushing on your sponge, if you're noticing you can see some paint go down the sides, that either means you've got still too much paint on your sponge or you're just pressing way too hard. So you don't need to press super, super hard because you're really just painting that top surface. Okay, so once that first coat is done and I've let it dry for like a minute or so, I'm going to come back in here and I'm just going to push on these just to make sure they aren't sticking. It just gives them the chance to make sure they're moving and nothing is preventing them from coming out after. So you don't have to push them all out, but you just want to make sure they can move in their template. So just watch that. Okay, we're going to set that off to the side. This orange one is good, so we're going to do one more coat. If you're fine with 2 and it looks good on you, then you can obviously leave it. I want to do one more coat, so I'm going to do it again. Oops, I don't need to blot off. Let's start with this one. Just remember, when you're putting it on, you still want to be careful in which direction. You just don't want to do like some crazy pouncing all over the place. You really want to make sure you are watching. If you're moving a stroke or anything, it's going with the grain. If you start doing some weird markings, you'll be able to see that. So you want to, when you're putting it on, whoops, just, you know, as you can see, I'll put it on in the middle, but then I'll work my way with the grain to put it on. So that way when it's drying, it will still look like I am, you know, it's going this way, the movement. If you leave this till the end and only wipe once, you will find that it just is a lot harder to get that paint off. So it's easier to get it off once it's still fresh. Okay, now that I'm done, I'm going to gently pull this tape back. And we'll let that dry, and then we'll be able to sand and then set up for the green. Okay, so I've given this a second. So this is actually dry, so I'm going to continue on with this first. So when you're sanding, just watch your wood still, even though it's in a template. You just want to be careful. If you notice there's a little bit of fuzziness to the wood, you don't want to catch it and rip a sliver out. So just careful there. Give that a wipe. You can even still check again, make sure those are going to come out. Just very careful. These are thicker letters, so obviously they aren't as delicate as some pieces can be. So let's just finish off with this. We do that second color, you can see it's solid, becoming more solid. Okay, so we're gonna let that dry, and then we can reevaluate whether we do a third coat. It's always better to do thin coats and do 3 than it is to try to rush it and do it in 2. So I'll just set that off to the side. Okay, so we will finish off with this one, and that's in that cream color, the lighter of the 2. Now for this one, if you have a toothpick, that will be great for cleaning out some of those lines on the markings there. Okay, so we are done with orange, so I'm just going to snip this one off. And start again. Now, same thing. Now, this one's got a lot of different areas. Now, if you want to, you can still use that heart in the middle. If you don't want to use that heart for anything, you can tape it back in there. It will just help keep that center cleaner. It won't have any paint go down the edge if you do it that way. So it's up to you if you want to use that heart for something or just stick it back in here. So just start. And don't worry about getting paint in those grooves. If you like the look of the paint in the grooves and you just want to fill it in, then that's totally fine. It's whatever you like. See, I'll just kind of squish. If you want them in there, you're just gonna have to squish really, really hard. If you squish it in there and then you change your mind and you would like to clean them out, then I'll show you what we'll do. And that's where the toothpick will come into play. Okay, so just go and wipe your edges first, because I guarantee you your edges have got some paint just because of the odd shape. You have to take your nail underneath that baby wipe and kind of help rub it. Now you don't have to worry so much about in those curvy areas, because remember, we're going to be putting the leaf back in there, so you don't have to do all of that in there. So that's kind of nice. So if you did tape the heart, remember, just make sure you can get that out. I don't have a toothpick here, so I'm going to use my knife, and I'm just going to come in here and clean out those grooves. Toothpick works as well. It does tend to break a little bit easier at the tip, but if you have a knife as well, that works. There we go. So it just cleans them up. Even if you did get a little paint, it just kind of keeps that the details more clear. Okay, so we're gonna let that dry. Let's come back to our gray and see how that's going. So let's give it a sand. Sometimes when it's in the template, it's hard to get sanding with the grain, especially near the edges where they are harder to get at, especially if it wants to fall in. So just do your best. And come at it a different direction if you have to. Okay. I think I'm okay with 2 now that it's sanded and dry. Sometimes when you're painting and it's still wet and it can look uneven because as it dries it gets darker. And some areas can still look lighter. So just want to make sure everything is even. I think I am okay with that actually. You know what? It doesn't hurt me to do a third one, so I'm going to do one really, really fast. Okay, let that dry. That one is done. And then I'm going to come back and do this. And then we're going to come back and finish the front, or paint that second coat of white. So just make sure that heart can be removed. Okay. Plop it back in. Give it a wipe. And repeat. Okay, I'm going to wipe those edges. Okay, and one more time cleaning these. Okay, and then just wipe it off, make sure that heart can move. Okay, and set it off to the side. And now I realize that I forgot to do this one, so I'm just going to come in here and quickly do a coat on this. So when you're moving, once it has a moment to dry and you're moving it around, just be careful. Remember, it is a little bit more fragile. If you want to, you can pull the tape off in the back and retape after, but you want to make sure that it's able to come out. Okay, so I'm just going to move everything aside here. And I'm just going to sand this one and get it out of the way. And I'm going to bring in our white round. So it is dry, and if you run your hand over it, it is very, very, very rough. So that first coat kind of acts like a primer coat. It helps seal the wood, but it also will raise that grain. So now we got to knock it down. Your 400 grit sandpaper with the grain. Just close any open paint here. And you're going to, and you can be fairly rough, not rough, you can put a lot of pressure on it. You want to make sure this is buttery smooth when you're done. So it might take a little bit more elbow grease to get it smooth than it will on your other coats. So go with the grain, which should be with the lines. And then I'm going to flip it. And I'm just going to come in on these edges because they could be a little rough just from being cut. Now you could do that ahead of time, sand those edges, but we're going to be doing it a few times anyway, so by the time we're done they should be fairly smooth. Same thing with the edges on this side here. And the sides will most likely be even rougher than the top just because it's a cross cut, so it tends to be rough to begin with. Okay, now depending if you have, electric sand or anything, if you don't and you want to make sure that back part is clean, you might want to, between each coat, take your sandpaper and kind of sand that back so the layer doesn't get too thick to come off. But I will sand mine later with an electric sander. So and you can see, nice thin coat. I can still see the wood tone, like it's still under there. That coat of paint is that thin. It's nice and even because we pulled those painted on and then take those that brush right across, so I don't see any back and forth brush marks. So that's what you're looking for. Okay, make sure there's no dust left in those grooves. And now we're going to go and do our second coat of paint, just like we did the first one. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to speed up the video, and then I will be right back. Okay, so that second coat is done. It's looking pretty even to me, so as it dries, I'll probably find that I am okay with 2. If you're getting a lot of unevenness when it dries, it means that you are playing with your paint too much, because you are leaving, you might be dragging it and it's pulling some of the existing previous layer. You are, leaving brush strokes where you get overlaps, and so some parts will look darker than the others because it'll have, in that overlap, it will have more paint there than it will everywhere else. So that's why, get it on, pull it across, leave it. If you do need to do a 3rd coat, then you can do a 3rd coat. But based on what I'm seeing, I am okay with that. So I'm going to let it dry, and we will just continue on with the rest of it. Okay. Okay, so now I can continue on with this piece and this piece. So this one should just need a sand. And I'm going to pull that heart out because I don't need it anymore. And so it saved the edge. There's a little tiny bit in there, and if I get in there and use my nail, I can usually just clean that up. And if you want to, you can always pop that heart out after each coat and just see if there's anything that needs to be wiped. I didn't think it would be too bad, so that's why I just left mine. But you'll notice the longer you let it sit, the harder you're going to have to work to get that off. So there we go. Okay. So that is nice and smooth. Clean up my grooves. I already did that, but as I sanded, it kind of just put the dust in there. So I'm just gonna come back and gently pull it all out. Sometimes too, you can always take a dry paintbrush and just go in there and use that to help clean up that stuff. But that part is done. So we're gonna set that off to the side. We can come back here and give this a sand. Remember, if you've left it too long, you want to definitely make sure that it can come out. Yeah, all movable. Okay, so I'm just going to grab that last coat of paint. Now, because you won't need this piece for a while, and there's the possibility that you could forget about it, what I would suggest is just pop that tape off and pop it out and let it dry on its own. When you go to sand it, you can tape it back in here, because it always is better to sand it in here than it is on there by itself, because you're less likely to break it and you have the support of the frame. So we're just going to pull that out. And I will come back and sand it later in here. And then I can remove this tape. Okay, so now on to, actually, we're going to do the same thing with this, because I'm going to sand it. I would not want this to get stuck in there. So once you're done, pull all that tape off. You won't, okay, hold on. Okay, pull all this tape off and just watch. This usually doesn't happen. So this one wants to peel off the adhesive on the back already, so just careful And then just plop that back into place. Okay, so there's that little eye. So if you don't want to lose it, keep it on some tape, but don't throw that tape away. Just keep it there. And you can get rid of all those extra centers. You don't need those anymore. Plop that out. This one just needs a little coaxing. But now they are out. You know they're not going to get stuck in there when it's time to put it together. We will use the template again when it's time to put it together, but we'll just set those there and not have to worry about them. Okay, so next we are going to work on the green. Now this needs a little sand first, so I'll just come in here. Okay, so we're going to need to tape off here, even though this will cover it up. You just want to make sure you're not getting any green where when you layer that, it might show. So I'm just going to come in here, tape this. Now when you're taping, even though we're layering a piece on top, oops. You may just want to make sure that you haven't gone too low or too high. So just even if you want, you can just put this on there and just make sure that when you put this on and you line up that bottom, that you haven't taped your green tape too high. So when I line this up, I don't see any of my green tape. So that way I know I'll be painting right to that green tape, and when I put that on, it will be fine in terms of where the green is supposed to go. So that is good there. And really just run your finger and make sure it's nice and sealed. Now, same thing on the purple. You need to come in here. You don't need very big pieces unless you're a messy painter. And you want to make sure you're really covering up your flower. So cover it enough that, I mean, you don't have to cover the whole flower, but you definitely want to make sure when you're dabbing your sponge that you're not going to do any on the purple. So just go wide enough that you feel you're safe, and really make sure you're careful because these stems are fragile, and then just really rub where it meets there so the green doesn't bleed underneath. Now here, because there's green here, I'm going to tape off more of this flower. And I might do that here too, because okay, so let's just split this here and one down here. So now when you look at it, you should have all of your stems exposed. Okay, and then you need these pieces as well, and you need these pieces. So I'm not putting those back in the template because then I'm going to have to worry about taping all that purple off, and that's just unnecessary. So now because I'm doing this on parchment, it's not going to stick. So I'm going to just stick it up here, and hopefully you guys can see that. I don't know where you guys are. Yeah, you should be able to. So I'm just going to stick these here. I'm just going to line them up as close as I can together. So when I'm painting, it's a lot easier. Okay, so we're going to stick those there. This one's here, there. So now we need our green. And where's my screwdriver? There we go. Okay, and once again, I'm done with this sponge. And you can snip it off, especially because a lot of these pieces aren't very big. The smaller, it's not gonna make a difference. So once again, take your green. Now for me, it is really hard to get in here to wipe it off, and you really don't want to have to break. So even though when you're painting and you get a little dusting of paint on the edges, if you are not getting big puddles of paint and it's just a light, faint dusting, it will look just fine. But if you start to get really messy and it's blotchy, and then you may need to go in there and wipe it off. But the best way to do that is making sure this is almost dry, so you're not getting any paint inside there. So I'm going to start on the bigger areas, because then I can come in here and use most of my paint on those areas, and then that way it won't get on the edges. Okay. Now the first coat doesn't look like it's doing much, but it's really, remember, it's just that primer coat. We need to get those wood fibers filled with paint. We'll sand it, and then it'll start to take the color nicer. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can show you. Actually, it's not that bad. I'm not really seeing a whole lot of paint on the sides regardless. My coat is very thin because I can still see a lot of the wood tone underneath. Definitely use less. Now I'm going to do the same thing with these pieces over here, and hopefully you guys can see that. There, so those ones are done, and then we have these pieces here. Now same with these ones. These ones are also hard to wipe. So if you're just very light in paint, and if you're not overloading, you should just get a nice consistent hazy look on the edges. So this one just has very, very faint, and I'm fine with that. Okay, so that's the first coat. So I'm just going to give that, actually these ones are already dry because there's that thin of a coat. Now, very, very, very careful because there's no support. Now I could try and put it back in here, but sometimes my tape is in the way. But, oh, this one's not too bad. Okay, so if you want to, stick it back in here to sand. That way you have a little bit more support on those stems. Might have to push on it a little bit just because sometimes the wood wants to bounce back. Okay, so that works. Just gonna have to pop it out through the front, and if you've got tape and it's stuck, you might just have to gently lift it out. There we go. Okay, so back to coat number 2. Same thing, just repeat. Okay, so I have a little bit more build up here. That's because we're on the second coat, but it still seems very consistent. So to me, that is just fine again. So you gotta sand these ones. Just gently on the tape. Give those a sand. Wipe off any dust. And repeat. Okay, this one might be able to see. So you can see how there's just this little dusting of paint all the way around. So to me, on there, it's more difficult to try and get it all off. And if I start spot wiping and some of it won't come off, then it's gonna even look more funnier. So for me, I'm okay with that. So that's what that is. Now these ones, if you're careful, you can just sand them out here if you want. You can put them back in the template, except one of them doesn't go in there very well. Okay. So we're gonna let them dry a sec. Come back to this. And then you can put it in your template if you want. Use your finger, it'll help you tell whether it's smooth or not. And I'm looking and I am okay with that. So those ones are good. So now I'm gonna peel this tape off. And just be careful when you do on the flowers that you don't break your stems. So that is that part. Okay, next is the purple. So we're just gonna set these off. We'll sand them in a minute. And I'm sure I'm fine with these. Yeah, they look pretty consistent. So maybe I'll just sand them right now. Those ones I'll leave till after. Okay, purple's next. So let's grab my tape. So once again, you're going to tape where they meet and really make sure that area is pushed down with your finger. Use your nail if you have to seal it. Just don't want any of that paint to come through. Now here where I could get some on the leaf, I'm going to cover that up. So your green should be protected from the purple. And, and if we want, I might, just because I really want to keep as much of the sides clean as I can. And once again, it is easier to paint to the template. So I'm going to actually plop that back in. And this one is all taped and ready to go. So we're going to do the purple now. Okay, so grab your sponge, snip it off, and same thing. So now we're just doing the purple. Now, these ones, obviously the face of it is all scored, so it's not, you don't have to worry about paint down those, but we definitely have to worry about the sides. These are all individual tiny pieces, and if you get these little tiny ones stuck in there, the really, really thin ones, then they will most likely break trying to get them out. So make sure, you're definitely going to want to have the support of the tape on the back here because they could move fairly easily. So, all right, let's get that purple, blot it off, and then in we go. Okay, so those are done, and I'll come back to those in a second. Now, I've got it in here, but because I don't have any tape behind them, they're very, let's see, very flimsy. So I am going to line this up, and I'm going to run a bit of tape across the back. Now, if you don't want to paint it in the template, totally fine. You don't have to do this. But if you do, just tape it across where the flowers are, so when you're pressing on it, it's not pressing back down and it's sitting up more level with the wood. And remember, doing it this way, you can usually then avoid wiping the sides, because if you're just painting on the surface and your sponge is not that full, then it really shouldn't get on the sides. All right, give that a second. Come back. This is already dry, so very gently run your piece over top. Now just gently make sure they can move, especially those little ones. Okay, they're good to go. Now really 2 is all you really should need for this color. Okay, so look at it, make sure it's good to go. We're gonna let it dry and then we're gonna start removing these pieces, but I'll show you how to remove those so we make sure we don't mess up that order. So if it's bouncing back up and you just push the wood around the flour so that way you can get those edges nice and sanded. Give it a wipe. All right, one more time. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm just gonna leave that there. These look pretty good. The ones you want to watch for are the little teeny ones, making sure they don't get pushed into the grooves and it's not easy to get paint on those. So, okay, so these are dry. We're gonna sand them and then we're gonna get them out of here. Now, whether you put your painting and you're putting this together another day, you need to make sure that you keep these in order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is the order. So if you flip it upside down, you got to remember still, because this is going to be the easiest way to take them out. You're working backwards now. So, well, not backwards, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just be careful when you pull those out. Now, if the pieces are coming out as you're pulling them, that's good, because that also shows that those pieces are not stuck in there. Watch your tape. Make sure that if you did grab one, especially the tiny ones, that it didn't get stuck in your tape. And now you can just leave it upside down like that. You can see that they're moving, and then that way you won't worry about them getting stuck in there and you won't lose the order. If you want to, you can take this off, flip it over, and then hand place each piece in there after. That's fine, whatever works best for you. You just don't want to forget which piece is which. And eventually I will move it out of the way here. So in the meantime, you can just go and sand all the rest of your pieces and get them all off to the side. Those ones are done. So I'm just going to pull those off there. I'm going to take my little gray one, stick it there now. Get rid of this. And this one needs a sanding. So you can either just leave it and wait till you get it on the birdhouse and then you can sand it, or wait till these are out, put that back in there, and then you can sand it in there. But you definitely want to be able to do it where you can support it a little better. All right, so in the meantime, you can cut all these off. give yourself some room to get this all put together. Okay, so I'm just going to slide it like that out of my way. Now I want to make sure this is sanded, and I want to get it out of here as well. So okay, so you can take the tape off first. That might be easier. Now watch when you take the tape off. Obviously you don't want to break anything, but then you want to look and make sure that nothing bled, so no purple ran on your green. So if it happened to do that, you may just want to go in there with a little paintbrush and clean that up. Take the tape off here. Okay, don't throw this away because you still need it. That part is done. So we're just going to set that all off to the side and grab your round one more time. Okay, so for me, I am good with that. Sometimes whites make you need to do 3, but I am fairly happy with this. So now I'm going to sand it again, distress my edges, do whatever I want to make this the base for my piece there. I'm going to make it smooth, and I'm going to put a little bit of distressing on the edge. So sand all the way around. If you need to do some sanding on the back because you got a nice lip of paint, you want to do that before you attach everything on there. So I'm going to go out and do electric sanding on this before I even start that, because if you do it afterwards, there is a good chance you will break something. And if you can always go in here with a grittier sandpaper and just kind of see if you can distress some of that. I'm just using a 120 grit, just a little bit grittier. It will just help define those lines a little bit, but you don't have to. You can still see them for sure, but that's just what I like. Okay, so I will be back and we will continue on with the rest of the video. Okay guys, so let's do the next part here. So now it's time to assemble. So all of your pieces should be painted, sanded, and ready to go. So we have 2 options in which we can do this next part. You may find it easier to do it now, or you may find it easier to do it later. So, so these are the pieces that are going to go on here, and we're going to need this. So you can assemble all of these first and then stick it, then peel it off, and then put these all on. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to place this on first, because once I start plopping it over like this, then there's a good chance I could knock some of those pieces off. So I'm going to do it this way, and then I will start to layer the pieces on this once I get it in its template. Okay, so you're going to line your template up. You want to make sure that your lines are going side to side. However, if you like it to go up and down, that's your choice as well. But I do like it the side to side. So do your best to get it nice and level looking. And I'm trying to figure out Okay, so your piece will be slightly bigger than the round itself. So just evenly space that. Now I'm going to start with my letters because what I want to do is I want to get this thing in on here and I don't want it to move. I want it to be set in place while I slowly put these pieces on. So I've got it where I want. Gently press that in, make sure we're good. And I'm going to place my H in there. And I'm going to place this one here because then if I just do the top, I have a chance for it to kind of twist a little bit. So I want to get a top and a bottom piece so it pretty much will stay where I want it to go. So you're just going to flip these over. You've got the adhesive on the back and you're going to start to peel. If it starts to lift, I don't know if you can see that in the video, but if it starts to lift, you can rub this, push this back, give it a rub so it sticks better to the wood, and then continue removing. There we go. Okay, so just make sure everything is still good. It didn't twist at all. And press this one into place. Okay, so see now if you take it off, you'll see where that all is, and you can use it there to line everything up. So I'm going to do all the simple stuff first. I'm going to sit here, put my spring, put my sprigs, and then I'm going to work on this part last. Okay, so make sure you didn't lose that dot. Okay, there it is. Okay, so when you're peeling some of these pieces off, yes, you could do it in the air like this. Sometimes, you know, these are really fragile, so you want to make sure that you're really being cautious as you do that. So just, you know, maybe place it on the table and gently pull the tape and hold that wood firm, or delicately, I guess. Just be careful, you just don't want to break it, especially if they're little. Just really support wherever you are pulling on the tape. Make sure you get, whoops, all your pieces. Okay. That lined up. This one's got a bit of a bow in the wood, so you might just need to push on it and get it in there. And then push. I'm going to get rid of, do my little dots so I don't lose it. Okay, and I'm going to still continue on with the letters. Watch with the O, just because it's circle doesn't mean the circle is the same way. So if it's not fitting one way, then turn it around. There we go. Okay. Okay, so those are on. I'm gonna pull it off. You can see so far what's going on. Okay, whoops. Okay, so next I'm going to do these. Now each sprig is different shape. They both won't, and obviously you can't flip one over. So you really can't mess those up at all. Just grab those out of there. Usually I won't keep pulling it up. I like it to be a surprise when I lift it up, but so you can do what I do and keep peeking at it, or you can surprise yourself and lift it up at the end. But okay, get that in. Give that a press. So leave the top of the birdhouse until you get it off, just because it could get caught on there. So it's just easier to line it up once you get it out. All right, next we're going to do this. So I'm just gonna move this out of the way. So I would start at the bottom of the pot. That way you're not having to pull all 5 of them, or 6 flowers at a time. Okay, let's give that a better rub. Okay, so when you get to these, just gently pull one and watch that stem. Just get that out of there. So just don't put your finger on the adhesive, because if you lift up your fingers, you might peel off it on your fingers. So sometimes it sticks really well, and sometimes it needs just an extra little rub. So just support the sides, trying to avoid touching that adhesive. Okay, all the pieces are off. Bring your piece back over and line it up. So just careful if it catches on the sides that it doesn't stick on here. Okay, and then get that all pressed in there. Okay, and now you can peel it off. So pretty. Okay, so now you can start layering these pieces on here. So I'm going to do the simple ones first, because once we start to get to this, okay, I'm going to gently pull this off. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, make sure all of your pieces are there, 3 of each. And that way it's out of my way. Okay, so this lines up perfectly with this. So just use your fingers and just gently line it up. It's sitting there, but if it wasn't in the right position, I could easily peel it up. But as soon as I really push on it and make full contact, you're not going to get it off without ruining it. Okay, so the next part, I'm going to do this one. So that goes that way. Now, I like to stand up when I do this because I can see better. So line it all up. I've just kind of laid it on top. Now, I don't want to push on it quite yet. I want to make sure, because this score mark, some of these line up. Which one is it? It's this one. Lines up right to the bottom here. So I want to make sure that it's lined up and I haven't gone too high, that this doesn't cover the score mark. So I'm going to put this one first. Okay, so the point of the score marks are slightly less in size than the pieces that we cut. So once you place them on there, and you're even all the way around, you really should not see that score mark. Okay, so that one is good. And this one will be fine because it's gonna sit up higher. So now that I know that one's in place and it's not gonna get pushed out of the way, I can push this one down and secure it. Okay, so now I'm just gonna continue on with these. So make sure you have some good light. And you want to just check all sides, and when you're good, then push it into place. Now watch, you'll have to, nope, that's the wrong way. So just lay it on top, don't press it. You can be able to look at both sides, get some good light, because sometimes the shadow can make it harder to tell. Here, I want to get this. Okay, I'm gonna line these up here. We're up 6, 5, 4, 1, 2, 3. There, and then I can bring this better. There you guys go. Okay. Oops. So lay it on there. Not sure how well you guys can see this. And then just check all sides. If it's good, then press it into place. Okay, I'm going to leave this at the moment. I'll do right at the end, but it's going to sit there like that. Okay, so I'm going to start with my bigger pieces. Now I started here working to there, so that's these pieces here going there. Now this one has the bird thing, so I guess for this one I'm going to do that one first so I can really get my fingers in there. Now these ones are so very delicate, so you have to be very, very careful and just gently. So if you want, you can keep this one off too before you stick that one on, if you're gonna find it to be a little harder. So just gently press it into place. Try not to wiggle it. And then just keep going and doing all of them just like that. So set it on the top, look all the way around, making sure, see that one I can see once I move it into some better light, I could see that edge. I mean, it's not the end of the world if you see some, for some of you, like myself, it will bug me. So just take your time then if you think it will bug you. But it will look good all the same. So I'm just going to keep putting these pieces on and put it on fast motion because this could take me a few minutes, and I'm sure you don't want to watch me do every single piece in real time. So, all right, I'll be back soon, guys. Okay guys, I'm done. And so that's all good. That took me, I don't know, almost 10 minutes maybe less. Okay, so the next little piece. So this one is very delicate. So sometimes with your template, it's easier if you stick it back in there upside down. Okay, and use the template to support that fragile piece. Just gotta get started on that adhesive. Oh, sure. There we go. Okay, so just get that edge going and then just still hold it without trying to touch it, but then you've got the stability so that it doesn't break it. And because it's such an awkward shape, come on. Do you have a toothpick or something, or I guess if you have nails. I do not. Okay. There we go. There, so see, it took it out, it's in there, it's upside down. Then you can take that out. Slide that over. And we can place this in place. So this is longer, like it's not exact same width. So you can see a little point here and a little tip there. That should roughly be the width of the pot. So if you just kind of evenly center that, then you can press that into place. Yeah, you can go higher, lower, whatever, but that's where that is. And now it's all done. So the one thing I didn't finish, so if you, with your easel stands, you can give it a sand when they're done drying. And you can distress them or whatever it is that you would like to do. I mean, if you wanted to paint them, you could totally paint them as well, but I like some stain finish on my stuff. So to assemble, take this notch into this notch, and then you can, I know it's harder to see guys, stand it up like so, just like that. If you want to, you can hang it with a couple command strips if you want to put it on the wall, but this way you've got the option to either stand it, or if you decide to hang it, then you can hang it. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned some stuff. And I love to see if you go and change any of the colors. The colors we've used are the same as the ones in our spring collection. So that's why we've chosen these. So if you do purchase any of our other collection stuff, it all kind of goes together. But definitely can change it to suit what colors you like to bring into your home. And I'd love to see on our group page if you've changed anything on it. All right, thanks guys, and we'll be back next month. Okay, bye now.